Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gentlemen and girls of all ages. I said gentlemen and girls probably twice, but welcome to the T.O.A Podcast on the Onvermel Report. I am your host, as always, Onvermel. To my left, we have Ek returning for another week. Ek, would you like to say hi?
Maybe later.
Maybe later. And to my right, we have Zakta. Zakta, do you have anything to say to the people?
Yeah, I don't have a stylish hat right now.
I do. So, welcome back, everybody. Glad you tuned in for this episode, which might be only maybe 10, maybe more. Who knows? Where it is, thank you. Today, gentlemen, I would like to discuss with you Knight's Kingdom 2, or Knight's Kingdom from 2004, or KK2. For the rest of the episode, we're just going to refer to it as KK2 because that's what we've referred to it as for the last 10 years almost.
Old habits.
Essentially, it is
Probably about 16 years because it came out in 2004.
details. But
17 years.
Knight's Kingdom KK2 is just the essentially 2004 Lego released the first castle theme for the castle theme for that year, which shared its name with the 2000 castle theme of Knight's Kingdom. So fans have just coined it as KK2. Now, interesting about KK2 is it was about a 3-year gap of no castle and at that point for Lego was a pretty long gap. But as well as that, they had basically that was the year that Lego had changed over a lot of uh colors in their list essentially. Essentially all their grays had a slight bluish hue to it, so light gray and dark gray were now like bluish gray, like dark bluish gray, and then brown
Brown too, yes.
was now more of a reddish brown, and they introduced new colors like a new shade of purple. And
I think the other colors technically did change as well, but they were so minor and minute, it's almost impossible to tell. Dark red, you can kind of tell.
that is true, but those are the main ones. And then like they also introduced a new color specifically for the theme, Morsian blue, as people have known. It's technically I think called light like blue violet or something because it's a slightly more violet hue to a blue, but basically because it was only came out of KK2, people just call it Morsian blue because it's from the Kingdom of Morsia.
And after all these years, I am still grappling with the fact that they had to change the colors.
I've gotten used to it at this point. But KK2, for a lot of people, was extremely underwhelming. A lot of people didn't like it. A lot of people were very sour to it. However, let it be known that at this table, at least speaking for myself, I will say for myself, I love KK2.
I am a huge fan of it as well, and I was super excited about it at the time as well.
The first image I remember seeing of Knight's Kingdom 2 was the image of Vladik Encounter, where you see, because the first impression of this theme was, small set has a big saddle, or horse barding, on a horse. They have your armor. It's a purple knight. We got new visors, new swords, new shields, and it's just a small little set with all this packed into there. Like, honestly, like, the first impression, perfect. I mean, don't get me wrong. I was mostly excited about it when I first saw it because of purple. Because at this point, I did not own any purple Lego. So this is the first purple minifig that Lego had ever released, so I was super excited. But honestly, though, for a lot of other people, KK2 did have a bit of a sour taste. Ooh, sorry.
A lot of other Castle fans specifically just thought he was a little too juniorized in the colorful jelly bean knights and their Zords.
You know what? I want to say something about that. The Junior Eyes. It is no more Junior Eyes than Fright Nights were, to be honest.
I think it actually may even be better.
I would say they're on par. I would just say their color palette I think was a little bit more polished out than Fright Nights were.
Friday Nights felt juniorized in build. KK2 just felt juniorized in style.
But I don't even think KK2 had a juniorized style personally. I think it just had because like when you actually look at it like such, like I don't know, I think people just think it's juniorized. I mean, it didn't help that when it came out, it had the more bluish grays, which just made it feel a little less rocky and like stony, which didn't go. But the argument for the minifigs being a little what's it called, corny, because you had basically the 4 main characters. Yes, this year of Castle was the first time Lego ever decided to have essentially a story with their castle theme, not just names, but like story to it.
Probably something that we can thank Bionicle for.
Oh, we'll get to the point where we can definitely thank Bionicle for. But essentially, you had 4 main characters. You had Danju, the Purple Knight, Jaco, the Blue Knight, Erascus the Green Knight, and Santis the Red Knight, and then the Evil Knight Vladik with the King Matthias.
Really, after Bionicle, Knights Kingdom 2 was pretty much the first main story-driven theme that LEGO did.
Oh, definitely. Well, except Galador, really. But
What now?
We don't speak of that. Also, it
we-
failed
we-
utterly.
we did speak of that like a month ago.
Yes, we did speak about it. No more.
Okay, no more. But a lot of people I know at the time didn't like these really colorful knights. Now, and at that one point, yes, I agreed with them. I did not like the light blue shade of blue. However,
But he loved the purple.
naturally, that was a bias. That was just a natural bias. But I will say this. I have grown to accept the colors because I've come more to the realization that the medieval times, people weren't just all grays and browns. People liked color. And if you were a rich knight, because these were like the top knights of their province, essentially. Like, these were the best of the best knights. So, really speaking, wouldn't they have the money to paint like nice, fancy, colorful clothes? Wouldn't you have, if you had the money to dish out on nice, colorful clothes to represent your province? I'm pretty sure you do it. So, I think actually the fact that they are different colored, they all have, and this also, since the original castle theme from like 1970, 80, the 70.
1978 was when the first Yellow Castle came out.
Okay, since then, this is the first Lego castle theme that has distinctive, different heraldry for people who aren't enemies. Because essentially, from the really early stuff, it was kind of ambiguous whether or not they were together enemies. It was very much to your imagination. But once the 80s rolled around with Black Vulcans, Black Knights, and Lion Knights, it was very much more shown that these are rival factions. And LEGO stuck with that. However, this one literally has different heraldry for these different the different provinces of the kingdom, or at least maybe their family heraldry. All the kings got lions. You got Elendil with the wolves, Barantis with the monkeys, Talonjay with the falcons, and Orcsam
Orkosan or something like that.
with the bear. I can't quite remember that one super well. But I think the fact that they actually had, like, that's arguably more realistic, kind of. And the fact that you have the different shapes of visors was really cool. I think most people didn't like it because it was just it was just a stark difference than what they were used to at Castle. But I think objectively speaking, it actually was a really fresh, different take that I think is actually highly, highly underrated.
From what I've seen now, it seems to be mostly just Castle fans back in the day who thought negatively towards Knights Kingdom 2, where a lot of other fans quite enjoyed it, quite liked it.
I do remember quite enjoying it when I was younger, though I do know off the bat it had that initial, this is not quite the other stuff. And I remember being very upset that they didn't have, like, soldiers in abundance. And the swords, yeah, I've come around, but I still don't really approve of them.
I would have to agree that the swords are a little annoying. I like the look of the sword. The biggest problem I have with it is that they're very flexible, so they bend really easily and then get annoying marking. The design isn't as good as the classic swords. I will say that.
They're okay, yeah, but they're not great.
But that's a minor thing. And interesting thing,
Yeah.
something I did change my tune on was the shield. I remember when they first came out with these new octagonal shields, I didn't like that they had a stud in the middle, which is interesting because Legos had stud in the middle shields since the 80s. This is nothing new. And I've actually really grown to like the larger scale shield and like that has like the double like logo on it. But I think when it came down to fans, it just had a really unlucky time of release. It came in 2004 where colors were completely changed. So for people who wanted to have more consistency in their creations, that wasn't good. Second, it was like a 3-year gap later from a castle. So at that point, people have been like wanting the desire for castle was probably even greater than normal because it's been a while. So people want what they used to have rather than a gradual progression. And then the colorful knights, like I say, it was just so different than what had come before. Now, I think another big thing that really got people not liking it, or at least didn't help matters, was I would say the biggest Bongo influence of this theme was that they had larger contraction figures for the knights. Now, this was different than Bionicle contraction figures and, well, closer to Galador, because it was very much system, but the connection points for the joints were technically compatible with Galador.
Yeah, the Knights Kingdom figures, you could swap limbs, you could make them glitch with Galador.
You could. Essentially, they were ratchet joints. They weren't ball and socket.
But they could be pretty dang sharp. Though they are definitely an acquired taste, I think.
See, the funny thing about them is people complain about Bionicle not being compatible with system, and that's why it wasn't good. Well, here we have construction figures who were 100% compatible with system. People still didn't like it. But the thing is, the Castle fan base is just not who it's. What I have learned though is people who liked Bionicle did like Knights Kingdom 2. They very much liked it, and it very much targets the same sort of thing.
A story-driven theme with action figures? Yeah, it sounds kind of familiar. Colorful action figures, even. Color-coded action figures.
That come in canisters, even.
That is true. And they technically also had powers. Not really, but essentially Danju was the wisest. Jaco was super fast.
Oh,
Maybe
yeah.
not Flash level, but he was extremely quick. It was very ambiguous what that meant. Was he just like, run 30 kilometers an hour fast, or was he like, zipping around like a blur fast? And then Raskus could do feats of agility that like no other man could do, and then Santos would be the guy picking up like cows. So
Yeah, he's just big and strong.
these are all like they're not like superhero level of powers, but they are like not realistic about what humans can physically do. And then Vladik, of course, had
Vladik's superpower
Lightning.
was... No, it was just evil.
Yeah, basically,
Yeah,
it was
evil.
essentially evil. But magic was a big part with the Book of Morsia. Vladik used the dark magic, and then there's the whole Shield of Ages. Honestly, it was a pretty lore heavy. Like it wasn't like super in depth lore, but when there was actually a lot of little stuff, like little tidbits of information about, because essentially during the first year they had, well, the first and second year they had cards, like for a game, like a card game, where these cards you would collect through the sets, magazines, and other promotions, and they were also compatible with the large figure shields to be a part of the game in that. Now, and the thing about these cards is they had usually a little bit of information in them. So you would get like little bits of information about King of Thias, a little bit about Danju, actually a fair bit about the Knights.
I think there was like over 100 cards too, so, add
Something
all that
with
up.
words.
There's a lot of little bits of tidbits.
And then there's also some books and just online stuff. But the thing is, so as someone who grew up with the theme, and only recently learned a whole bunch of other stuff, like there was stuff in the year one that was essentially teasing and foreshadowing year 2 and 3, and was still foreshadowing other stuff that you could tell that they had grander plans. And because one example of this, because in the third year and the final year, it was like kind of like half done. The enemies were basically just rogue like mercenary knights, and they're basically mentioned in the year one cards where it's mentioned like there's 2 cards referring to rogue knights. Just a nice little foreshadowing, and it's kind of cool. And then there's one card that mentioned the sorcerer who was in league with Vladik, which is like it's only mentioned in this character, which sounds like it was, and I think that character might have been slightly hinted at with the final year with the large like blue orb on top of Mistland Tower. I think those are connected. It's really hard to say because by the third year there was just less sets, less information. There was like no books for it. Like so the amount of like content you could figure out with the lore was like nothing. Interesting enough, also about the third year, I know I completely skipped the second year. Let's go back to the first year. So first year you had cards, you had big figures, new sets, new characters. A lot of mixed feelings about those people. The only soldiers you got were bad guys, which, although the nice thing about this was, you basically, because bad guys were the only people you got soldiers for, you technically, it looked like on paper that you'd be getting more bad guys than good guys, assuming you don't use duplicate knights. If you go for just the characters, you technically get a bunch of extra bad guys. So, and
They really upped the Shadow Knight count in year 2, though.
also, another reason why I
Very
think this
wise.
theme might have not hit as well with older Castle fans, it did come off a little gimmicky because like with Grand Turn with the jousting horses on wheels,
Yeah, that's pretty gimmicky.
that is the most like play functiony gimmick that the sets had. Now, and even that I look at and go, okay, that's a little weak.
The two of us had that set. I don't think we ever used that to joust one another.
No, that set was rarely ever built. I was very much a parts pack. But even like with Border Ambush, like you have like the soccer kicking thing to get the rock across.
at least once or
So like that's kind of fun, but again, just when you want to play set, it's part of this world, and you have the soccer stand. It's just like, well, okay,
I will give them credit though. They used a soccer stand in a castle set.
So I would definitely say, year one, very mixed bags. A lot of stuff was different than what people had hoped. Only two sets had horses, and for Lego Castle fans, horses and soldiers are very, very big things. Interesting enough, year two comes around, and you can tell that Lego had essentially. Ooh, sorry, I had a drink earlier, and it's coming back to have revenge on me. But year two comes around, and it looks like Lego definitely had listened or something because not only does this is going to get into a bit of a rant for a second. They had everybody with a horse, almost. Basically, with it says like almost every set had a knight with a horse, so you just got a lot more. However, Danju did not get a horse. For some reason, Jaco got two sets with horses. Danju got one, but that was just because Jaco was the main character. Danju was probably the least popular character, and he's the old man apparently.
Onvermel here, you will forever feel gypped about this.
I will forever feel gypped about this, but like that year, every knight got up. There's basically 4 horses for the knights, an extra horse for the Shadow Knights cart, plus a horse that actually came with Black's Fortress for the castle. So you got like 6 horses on the set. Plus that, you got a lot more Shadow Knights because like every set had at least one Shadow Knight, and then some sets had like 2 Shadow Knights, and then the castle Black's Fortress had 3 Shadow Knights, elite Shadow Knights. So you bought all the sets, you actually had more bad guys than good guys, and this was much more heavy focus on Vladic's artillery. And also, all the shields were changed. Instead of all having these octagonal shields, they brought back the old molds of smaller triangle shields for the good guys, and then Vladic got the classic oval shield. So I don't know if this was them responding to year one, like that was like, because like it's not like this major things changed, but I do kind of feel like it was partial. Actually, I think it's more so to do with the fact that the shield, the heart of the shield, wasn't part of the story anymore.
I mean, if you even just look at throwing year 3 in there, like as the years progress, they get more and more traditional castle, larger quantities of figs, more dull colors, and all that, and yeah, army builders in the last year.
But then third year, as Zactor was saying, they basically not so much duller, but if you look at the knights, they're not just like one monochromed color. Kentis and Adric, there was only really 2 good guy knights at this point. And they're red and green, but they had a lot of other like metalish gray colors. Their visors were, and then the bad guys, the rogue knights, there's just a whole bunch of them all over the place. A lot bigger.
And their main color was still black.
And the thing the third year ended up doing, there was one set, Battle of the Past, that actually just had other random knights with Kentis. Like there was just other random good guys, nameless characters, which was nice to see. But the third year of Formosa was just its own thing. But that's on a whole, KK2, like I said, people didn't necessarily like it. Mostly Castle fans. Like I say, if you if you grew up with it, you liked it. But if you grew up with like older, more classical Castle, because like it is different. It was the first okay, I guess Fright Nights was also a fantasy theme, but for whatever reason, people seem to forgive Fright Nights for whatever reason, and Dragon Master.
It's pretty 50-50 in the castle community for Friday Night. Some people love it, other people think it's juniorized and silly.
Both valid arguments.
But like Nice Game 2 was the first one to have to be story driven. Everybody had like names. It was also pretty heavily on the fantasy stuff.
There were other castle themes with names, like the previous Knight's Kingdom, the Fright Nights, as mentioned before.
Even Magisto was like one of the first named Lego characters.
And even the first Knight's Kingdom had hints of some sort of storyline, but it didn't have a story.
Okay, there were stories. Well, let's say this: there were stories that were given to the line, but they didn't direct the line. Because like in there, I think it was mentioned that like Cedric was a knight of the realm, whatever. But it wasn't like they didn't create this theme for a story. They just put stories with the sets, essentially.
I see the original Knight's Kingdom as like, we're giving you some material to work with, but we're not actually going to tell you the whole story. That's up for you to decide.
I mean, that's very much similar to what they were doing with most themes in the 90s and like early 2000s. Like Adventures really didn't have a story. They just had named characters, and that was about it.
Some named locations.
Something to get you.
So, it's just like, but KK2, actually gave you full-fledged, a story beats going. Like you had, again, like the card game, which gave you a bunch of information, and the cards kind of flow along with the story in certain aspects. You had like actual series of books, now like young reader books, but still books nonetheless. and then just like other material as well. And like so you have all that, and like I think there's like even some comics like in magazines and such. But it was very much story driven, not nearly as heavy as Bionicle, and it definitely never got like the like I said, it lasted essentially 2.5 years. Very common for Lego themes to only kind of make it to about for the 3 year plan to only make it through about 2.5. But I think by the third year, people had forgotten, kind of ignored KK2 because Vikings came out that time, and then they kind of stole all its thunder. And there was just also more Vikings than there was KK2. But again, Vanity, and even like the large figure sets, you can tell that Lego was improving those because the first year definitely they're a little weak, they're a little very awkward. But the second year they got like nice new like leg and shoulder armor, printed like some print on the visor, newer sword, like they just looked a lot like sleeker,
I
especially
would say that of the large figures, the second wave were the best ones.
because the problem with the third wave was the armor, they were almost too bulky, and the upper arms never had pieces to fill them in like the second wave did.
Yeah, the armor was too gappy.
They were nice,
I
but
very much like the second wave. They nailed it.
also with the second and third wave, you didn't have paper shields. But that because the game function of whacking each other's shields off, they still had parts, so you could still do the game function with it. But mostly at that point, Lego was like, we're giving up on this, but for those who like it, we're going to give you something.
I'm still annoyed that all the knights and bodies are essentially made for them to be left-handed.
Unless you're Raskus or King Matthias who have left and right hand moving.
A very odd choice if you think about it.
It probably just means your designer was left-handed.
I think it has something to do with the way the fighting each other with the knight is set up, that it just works better with them being left-handed. If you're using it in your right hand.
That would actually make a little bit of sense. But
Hogwash.
But the large figures, interesting enough, never went away. But by the third year, they did do something interesting with those by giving them actual like artillery. Like it wasn't just figures. By the third year, King Matthias and Lord Vladik basically both had some for siege
I
equipment.
believe you mean King Jaco.
Sorry, King Jaco. Yes. By the third
same
year, Jaco became like there was a big time gap. Like there's about a good like 20, 30 year time gap between the years. Well, Dark Magic kept them alive. But Vladik had a cannon essentially, and then Jaco had a catapult. So it was nice to see that. And yeah, but you could definitely tell that they had planned like a lot of stuff ahead of time, like with the cards, like with the Rogue Knights being teased ahead of time. But one thing about the large figures, visors and such, or large figure characters, was their visors. Now, interesting thing about this is they're really cool, but they're not compatible with anything else besides the head they were designed to go on. Except King Matthias' helmet crown because he got a little something. But all the visors aren't compatible. And you can tell that Lego realized, or the designers kind of realized they goofed up on that, because in the second year, they used one of the visors, Lord Vladik's, as the Vlad mask, which is basically the parts of the magical relic on his castle. Now, they're not compatible with anything, so they kind of had to like use rubber pieces to kind of like jam it in there. Surprisingly enough, the next year, all the visors that they redesigned for that year have a axle connection on the back. And one of them was, again, used on a model. So you could definitely tell after the second year, they're like, dang, we really, really should have made these compatible. And I think Zach Towers wanted to say something. Go ahead.
I was just thinking randomly, if they had gone into the fourth year, we would have found out that Vladik with his dark magic really became Will of the Witch of the Fright Nights.
No. But I'm also nice. Another thing about the third year of large figures they also did that was nice is they didn't all have swords. Because up in the first 2 years, every character that wasn't a Shadow Knight just had swords. Just sword, sword, sword. Which, don't get me wrong.
And swords and swords and swords.
Like they have so many swords.
We all have
With so many
swords.
swords, they could have epic sword shirts, man. So there was a lot of them. However, the final year, the characters actually got a bit more different. Like Adric had a large axe. Kentis got a mace. The bad guys got, Drakus still had a sword, but the other Rogue Knight, Karzon, got a flail. Like,
Only in large figure
well,
form.
that's true. On small figure form, like Kentis and Adric both got, which Kentis' mace, just using a brown stick with like a gear on it to make a mace. Very clever, very clever. But But the fact that they actually shaped up, they got different weapons, got new characters, kind of toned down the overly bright colors, and also the armor in the third year also didn't have emblems or coat of arms or anything on the chest, so they were a bit more universally could be used for a lot more other stuff.
Way more generic.
And which is because like the first year you had generic enough armor with like the markings of the such, but they were very much just kind of like lines and such. And then the second year you actually got the animals on them to represent each knight, and then they kind of went back to more generic. But the prints on the third year actually had like chainmail and stuff, so they just were a lot cooler looking. Oh yeah, oh yeah, think about colors. Another color that they introduced that year was all the speckly colors.
And they never used it again.
Yeah, I really wish they had kept those like speckly armor, like that. Use speckly for more stuff because I really love the color, but there's so few parts that like you can't really do anything with them. But that's just a minor pet peeve. But overall, it's like I honestly think that KK2 does not just get the love or the recognition. Thank you, the recognition it deserves because, like I said, it actually because like who doesn't like a good story with their fantasy world? That's usually half the thing. I mean, yes, for army builders and like giant walkers for display, maybe it's not the best. And
But for a kid who just wants to play some knights and have a fantasy setting, it's pretty good.
because there was like a lot of just like kind of like mystery stuff because like characters like the Guardian or because like the Guardian, I'm like, okay, he's guarding the Shield of Age. Like the whole Citadel of Orlin, like or
That's a
everything
cool
surrounding
word.
that is just cool. You got this giant snake in the basement, swinging axes. You got the Guardian. Everything's very mystical and magical.
If you're feeling uninventive, you can just follow along the storyline that the sets give you, but you don't have to stick to that.
And like weird other information, you just end up picking up like, and then there's like the Moorlands that are referenced throughout the story, which are like, well, what the heck are the Moorlands? Which isn't also the whole second year is in another ancient kingdom of Ancoria rather than the regular Morsia.
Well, the Moorlands is pretty obvious. It's just more land.
Wah, wah, wah.
Oh, it's better than Newfoundland.
Hey, don't diss the Newfoundlanders.
Hey,
Hey, I've known people from Newfoundland, so screw you.
Oh, yeah, just some newfies, eh?
Hey, be nice to the Newfies, okay?
We're
I know
Canadian,
some
we can make
Newfies.
fun of
Some
ourselves.
Newfies I know are really nice. I've heard nothing bad about Newfoundland, so shush, people. But no,
God,
um,
I think you from a different country.
but interesting thing, like with like those like kind of like more mystical elements, yeah, that, and then you have the Shield of Ages, which I didn't bring up until now. The Shield of Ages essentially is the MacGuffin of the series. Interestingly enough, the Shield of Ages isn't even in year one. Only the heart of the shield is in year one. That is the MacGuffin is only the heart of a bigger piece. And like you have like this knight called Orlin, like that's just an ancient character that's not in a set, but he's in the lore. And who I think who knew King Matthias or stuff like that. But they were looking for the heart of the shield to defeat Vlad and return the kingdom to brightly good guys. But then like year two, Vladic's been collecting the pieces of the shield to make the Vlad mask, and so they have to use, they have to stop him from completing it, and then they use the heart of the shield partially to destroy the Vlad mask. And then year three, they basically, as far as I understand, part of the story is to bring the parts to the Mistland Tower to put back to forge the heart of the forge to recreate the Shield of Ages, which it took 3 years, but we finally got an actual shield piece for the Shield of Ages. Because like the first year, the heart of the shield was just a trans orange 2x2 round dish, which was designed to go on the shields, but
For something that was the heart of the shield, it was bigger than a shield, or
Okay,
half the size.
But let's be honest, I think that was more so designed for the big figures, I think. Because, interestingly enough, right before I let you steal the mic away from me, the big figures, the back of the cards, like the game cards that could be used on their shields, looked like the heart, they looked like the Shield of Ages, and the trans orange would go on there, boom, heart of the shield, part of the crew. Wait.
I want to know how you get a single shield to create something that's bigger than an entire person.
Well, it was a really big shield originally.
Dark magic!
It stretches, it's like an origami, you fold it out. You really have to fold a lot. But, actually bringing up the Vlad mask is interesting because this is something that like the large figure they actually created a new shape mold for Vladik that it's the same shape as the Vlad mask, but the minifigure still used the old mold from the original Vladik. And I'm sitting here wondering, okay, which one is the canon version of Vladik? Because even the third year, one uses the one shape, one uses the other shape. I like to believe that in year 2 he still has the spiky visor, but by the third year he liked how the Vlad mask looked, and then he forged it to look like that. Also, year 3, Vladik got a freaking cape, so like I say, I like my knights and lords with capes. It was just really really. Also, his sword and the big figure was really really nice.
The large KK2 figures came out obviously in the wave 2. Why wouldn't they design the Vlad mask to be supported by something if they used it on that other set?
This is why I'm thinking that after they had created the Black's Fortune with it, where they realized, oh shoot, we really should have designed a connection point, and that's why they made the point to like
And they
redesign.
made the battering ram just to utilize it.
They didn't have enough time to redesign it to fit an
Re-
axle hole, probably.
I, like it,
Because I think it would ruin the flow a bit, depending where they put it.
weirdly enough, though,
It actually
it
would
f-
ruin the
it
function.
technically kind of fits on a Bionicle Metro Nui head. I've if you get it just right on the side pegs, right on a certain part of the head, it can sort of kind of slide on. But if you breathe wrong, it's gonna fall off. But it like if it could stay put, it looks so nice. I have one mock that has it, so I have like some sticky tack with it, so I might have to take a picture. But like it fits on, it flows with the head really nicely, yet it just doesn't have an axle or a connection point. It's so like I said, I really feel like they just realized that they'd really goofed up on that and made a point.
They really done goof. They should have made them compatible with Bionicle heads. They really should have.
Honestly, like if KK2 visors were compatible with Bionicle,
I'd be on top of the world right
first
now.
off, you would see a lot. I think you see a lot more of them used in Bionicle mocks because I love how those visors look, and I wish I could use them. Also, I bet you would see Karzani mocks with Raskus's visor. I'm just saying.
I mean,
I
it
bet
technically
you'd see
is,
it.
but it's hodgepodge
But-
literally created out of.
I think I'm not. One thing I did like about the KK2 guys was like all the swords, the weapons. But I could definitely tell that there's no market for the large figures like at all. There's not even parts from them. They're dirt cheap. There's not even parts for them that are expensive. Like everything about them, cheap. At least with the system sets, there is at least some
I've
market.
amassed quite a collection of the large figures just by thrift stores and the odd occasional Bricklink purchase, even.
Usually it's because there's Bionicle with it, and that just so happens to be there, and we're like, well, they're kind of using. Now I do have uses for a lot of. The biggest thing I don't have use for is their torsos. The limbs, I like to build a lot of mech building. Those are nice to have a lot of. Actually, the best thing about those figures are typically those ratchet joints limbs only are in dark blade. You don't get a lot of variety in color. Lucking it with the knights, you got them in purple, red, green, baby blue, dark red, dark green, keat orange, sand blue, Morsian blue, dark white. A lot of colors actually.
Light bluish gray.
Dark white, yes.
No, light bluish gray.
Oh yeah, light bluish gray. Which the black and light bluish gray for my specific needs are very, very very nice. I like it a lot. Oh, so tasty. But yeah, I'm gonna say it. KK2 is awesome. All you Boomer Castle fans out there who are whining about it, you can take all that purple, give it to me, and then go back into your cave and build your gray walls.
It's nice having no audience. We can say whatever we want.
I mean that's true. Well, unless you diss Newfoundland, then you can't say what you
What
want.
do you have against Newfoundland?
I like Newfoundland.
Maybe one of those listeners is a newfie.
Maybe. No, I just
You're the
every
same
time
family we
every
are.
time I meet someone from Newfoundland, they're always really really nice people. I have a fondness. Plus, it's Canada. I have a fondness for people.
Yeah,
I don't want to
make
be
fun of
dissing.
yourself.
I don't want to diss the geography of my own country. That'd be mean. People in the country are different, but the country itself. Go to the dirt and apologize. Go outside. Go to the dirt and the ground and apologize to Canada.
I have a right to make a fun.
But I would say if there was one thing, I do really wish KK2 had lasted just a little bit longer. Because like I said, there was parts of the story that were alluded to, never quite got to see. And also KK2 did have a very interesting thing about it. It had the first Lego chess set. There was actually an error where Lego had chess sets. And essentially in the first year they had, the end of the first year they had a chess set between Jaco's army and Vladik's army. I mean, the king was still King Matthias, and then there was well interesting. It was not really like the characters are not canon because you have like a skeleton queen on the one side with a Shadow Knight king, and then King Matthias has a wife, but in the story you never see him with a queen. So there's a reason why Jacob gets crowned king and not their child,
Those are the only female minifigs in all of Knight's Kingdom 2.
which is funny because we came across some information saying that King Matthias was the first king to allow women knights in it. Some obscure bit of trivia. And I'm like, really? Because I don't see any of them anywhere. Although, judging by the age of that army of those pawns, no wonder they needed women. All the men were old. They needed fresh meat. But,
No young recruits.
interesting, like, it's weird. Speaking, like, actually with those Jacob armies, like, I think we were mentioning in another podcast, like, the Danju soldier, Raska soldier. It looked like Lego was very much intending to release, basically, like, soldiers for buildings. And I honestly don't know why they didn't.
As special promo polybags.
I bet the reason why they didn't was because fans didn't like the theme, and so they cut the budget somewhere, thinking like, okay, this was a bit less successful than we thought. We're going to cut it here. Which I'm like, I bet fans did this to themselves. I bet people complaining is the reason they didn't get their soldiers. I mean, I'm not sure if they would have wanted them. I would have loved more Danjus cheaper, but I'm glad I have them. But like I said, like the Vladik, and I know they were planning to release them because you look at the numbers for the Danju or the Jaco and the Vladik soldier, and there's the number released for the Raska soldier. There's about there's about two numbers in between all those that are missing. So it happens to be the Danju and Sanchez soldiers. So it's like, well, what do you know? How convenient that this is just right there. And like I said, there was like obviously the parts produced. So it was like, I don't know what sort of promotions he would have been available for. But I was also going to mention that there was a time that Lego was making chess sets for a few years. They had Vikings, next wave crownies, but pirates. KK2 actually had a lot of different
Pirates.
pirates. But like no, KK2, like you look at, they had not only like main wave of system like play sets. They had what's it called? They had large construction figures. They had like some polybags. They had a chess set. They had books. They had a game, like a board game. They had all those cards. Like Lego was putting a lot into this, and I don't know. I just really felt like it was a lot better. Like even like when it first came out, yeah, we all made fun of it. It was fun to make fun of it. It was a bandwagoning a little bit.
But we also loved it too.
I think I liked it the most when it first came out, most because I had purple, so I was the most biased. But I would definitely say Ek has grown to like it the most, or liked it the most but didn't show it.
Citadel of Orlan is one of my most favorite childhood sets. It's pretty simple, it's pretty basic, but it's very unique.
And it's got a lovely name.
Also, there were actually some sets that never showed up in the story, by the way. Basically, there was like the first two waves both had two co-packs, like two sets, where you had Black Siege Engine, Knight's Castle Wall, never showed up in the
Both
story.
great sets.
It's essentially known as Town J, but the set was called Knight's Castle Wall, so. But it's very much also supposed to be Jaco's basically provincial castle. And then the next year had like a boat and a little docks for Vladik, which are actually really nice sets. So, and like the figs, although there's one thing that every person who's ever had KK2 can agree, the Shadow Knights were really nice minifigs. And those Shadow Knight helmets are still kicking around, by the way.
I do like their helmets.
Yeah, that's probably the one thing out of KK2 that has had the longest life.
But in conclusion, because this is almost 40 minutes and editing, I think KK2 is really good. I love it. Doesn't get the respect it deserves. So for anyone out there, I would say check it out. And if you stuck this long and like the podcast, I would say subscribe and like this video. Comment if you want. Hey, what's your opinions on KK2? Hey, David, say something. You like that last shout out, huh? Here's another one, baby. So, you guys have any closing thoughts to say about KK2?
I wish Lego would release a castle theme with a storyline again.
I wish they released a theme with different like knights with different heraldry on their shields.
Just wish they'd release something that wasn't licensed.
Yeah, the whole heraldry thing, I could go for that too.
So that isn't Lions and Dragons. Well, this has been the T.O.A Podcast. I have been your host, Onvermel, and we are retiring from the night.